geographical distance. But again, this is actually nice to have the Zoom call and have individual faces and feel like we're collectively working on this as we have been for 4+ years now. So just wanted to say thanks again for everybody attending. And I know we've had a little bit of a break here in the last quarter or so. It's been slightly longer than our normal cadence of meetings, largely given everything else that's going on in the world at large, but also because we want to make sure that the city continues to grow on its path towards being removed from financial emergency. And of course, a lot of that includes having a little more distance and actual ability to show that you're making the right decisions and moving forward on your own accord. So again, I know we have plenty of time today for discussion for those matters and more. But if we will, we'll just go ahead and do a roll call. And I'm going to pause there because we didn't rehearse this earlier. It may very well be that we have somebody to call roll. If not, I can call roll. Brian, do you have any suggestion there? Do we have a staff person from the EOG, or should I call roll?
I can call roll.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Chairman Andrew Collins.
Here.
Member Angela Connect. Member Kim Mills.
Here.
Member Vernita Nelson.
Present.
Member JD Patterson. And member Frank Brawler.
We'll let the record show JD is here. I think he was probably just on mute during that quick minute there. So JD is present and can be counted towards the quorum, but I know we are missing 2 members.
All right. Looks like you have 4 members, or is it 3?
4. So we have 4 members on the phone.
All right. So you're 1 shy of a quorum.
Okay. I tell you what, normally we could move forward and actually accept the meeting minutes that's on the agenda from July, November 11th. I know that those are the past 2 meetings are obviously some months old now. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those. Again, we'll hold off on taking that official vote for acceptance now until perhaps later in the meeting we can have a quorum and circle back around on that if Frank or Angela join the call. But we certainly don't want that to delay our progress here and slow down the conversation. But members of the board, please take a look at those 2 sets of meeting minutes, and at a future meeting, if we have to, we can always catch up and accept those and put them into the official record. So next on our agenda, after that business had been taken care of, we would like to move into now to the report from the governor's designee. And I'd like to recognize Special Counsel Mr. Hunter.
As normal, the general, the chief wrote our standard letter advising as to the events going on in the city, the office for the Chief Inspector General's conduct as reviewing both invoices, technical questions, resolutions, ordinances, any complaints received. I believe you guys received a substantial package with multiple different documents. Overall, the last 6 months has seen a fairly stable running city, considering the fact that we've had the pandemic and other inflammatory events that have, hit the financial constraints of both the city, the state, and the federal government. There was a police department analysis conducted by the Miami-Dade County. That report has been included in here. The city and the chief asked that you both read it. And if you have any comments or suggestions or recommendations, we ask that you send them to us as a group. In review of the invoices and the budget to date, the city has been able to maintain this budget. Its expenditures have been consistent with the last 2 years. There's been some minor divergences, most of them having to do with just minor changes or minor emergencies. Nowhere has the budget changed by more than, $2,000 beyond expectations without conducting a budget amendment. Even the budget amendments have mainly just shifted around money to reallocate sources from one area to another. So overall, the total budget remains consistent and remains stable. The total invoices received to date is 1,277. We've authorized 1,270. The 7 that were denied by the state are only for procedural reasons that we're still working out. For example, issues regarding the description of the actual events, so fairly minor. Expect they'll be worked out. Grand total, the expenditures are close to $7,000 for the first half of the year. That's less than the last 2 years. So we're hopeful that the city's finances will remain this way for the last half of the year, even though traditionally the last half of the year has been the most expensive, as we've involved flooding and there's been issues, having to fix both plumbing and the streets that have happened in the last half of the year because of the standard rainfall. Resolution to ordinances have been standard running of the city. There isn't anything that really has popped up that's been unusual or anything that's given the state heartburn. The only thing that's been major has been an ordinance to change as a matter of acquiring goods and services. It's ordinance 2020-07. We ask that the board review and discuss and provide a recommendation. Otherwise, the only other resolution that has not received an authorization is resolution 209747. The only reason why that one did not receive a go-ahead is because the last audit received by the Auditor General had a finding regarding the payment for leave, both annual and sick leave for former employees. This year we've had 5 or 6 employees who've left who've received payments. We've asked that the city provide a review and analysis of those events to ensure that they're following their standard rules and procedures and that they're coming with the findings of the Auditor General. Once we receive that report from the city, we'll authorize the expenditure of funds consistent with both their findings and with the city's rules and with the Auditor General's findings. Overall, we've received only 1 complaint. That complaint was included in your package. It appears minor and does not seem to consistently touch the running of the city. We've received no major complaints of an ethics violation. Overall, it looks like the city is running fairly smoothly considering, the outside events. There's been new developments regarding both the development of the city and the inflow of revenue. So this year was looking like, at least in the first quarter, to be a banner year. As we get closer to the end of the year, we'll find out how much COVID-19 has impacted the revenue. But everybody here is hopeful. That's the summation of the report from the governor's designee.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. And I know all that's a lot of information, but it's included in the packet and the materials that you sent around last Friday. I would like to pause just for a second and welcome Mr. Rollison. Frank, good to see you. Wanted to go back and include Frank as a member, and hopefully that gets us to a quorum. So we can go back and think about some meeting minutes. So we now have 5 of the 6 members here. Council Hunter, that's acceptable for a quorum, correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. So I just want to take one moment and go back to the top of our agenda and let everybody know that the 2 sets of meeting minutes were included in today's packet, July 17, 2019, as well as our November 11th, 2019 meeting. Now, hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at those, to see what the documentation is involved there. And if everybody feels comfortable, I'd be happy to take a motion to approve those minutes. So do I hear a motion to approve those, or would you like some discussion period?
This is Kim. I move that we accept the minutes as presented for the July 17th, 2019 meeting and the November 11th, 2019 meeting.
Thank you so much, Kim. Do we have a second?
Frank, I'll second it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rawson. So I don't think there's any discussion that's necessary there, but I do appreciate everybody going back and just making sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's. Hearing no discussion, I'd like to call for a vote on accepting those two sets of meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing hearing none in the negative, let's let the record show that this motion was approved and those meeting minutes will be added to our official record. So thank you for that quick pause while we go back, and just wanted to say welcome again to all the members. I know Vernita, JD, Frank, you guys continue to carry the heavy burden, being geographically a little closer and truthfully called upon for your working everyday knowledge way more than perhaps Kim and I or Angela do or have been called for. So I can't say thank you enough for that. And I know some of the expertise from the local government experience has been reflected in the progress that's been made here lately. So we heard from the governor's designee, got a few more things to talk about, but I certainly wanted to take a moment now and recognize the city staff and hopefully get an update from the manager's office.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson. John Pay from the City of Opa-locka, City Manager's Office. I have been working for the city now at my 8-month mark. So a lot of development and change has gone on as far as the running of the city, how it's ran, looking at policies and procedures, really getting a handle on our financial status with our finance department. We brought in a amazing budget administrator that works under my office directly with me, Mr. Robert Anathan. I would tell you he's a breath of fresh air. The same statements I think that the Executive Inspector General has used in regards to my appointment with the city. I would like to share those same sentiments with Mr. Anathan. Without him and Ms. Jerry Lazier, I don't know where the city would be at this point moving forward. But like I said, we're making outstanding strides. We're looking on potentially getting a 5-year plan done in the next 3 or 4 months. We're looking on getting caught up with our audits. Now we're 20-something days behind on audits compared to multiple years behind on audits. So that's a really, really good perspective to kind of look at where the city is going from here. We just awarded contracts to various engineering firms to do a total assessment of the city's infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, as well as the infrastructure of some of our facilities within the city. Because at the end of the day, the city has established a mill rate. That is the residents' money through their taxes. So we have to make sure that we're responsible financially for our residents and our stakeholders that come to and through the city of Opa-locka. Our city commission has been immensely supportive of myself and my administration, which is something that, beyond 2 years ago wasn't a fact. As far as seeing stability in staff, stability within the city manager's office, pretty much status quo, we maintain the same staff. I am doing a top to bottom review of each department within the city. A review was just completed on the police department. And we're going to do additional reviews in the areas of human resources, buildings and licensing, and of course, finance is a day-to-day operation that we always are getting various different input and guidance from Ms. Lazier as well as Mr. Anathan on the budget side. So those departments are pretty self-sufficient, and those are my stronger departments within the city. So we're kind of looking at those things. Once we get to the subject of the police review by Miami-Dade County, I'll speak on that once we get to that section of the meeting. The biggest things that we want to kind of focus on is getting a budget done that's done in a timely manner, that's professionally written and award eligible by the Government Financial Officers Association, right? We want to make sure we set the gold standards as far as dealing with budgeting and finance. And we're moving to those strides. Ms. Lazier is working with the staff and training them in bank reconciliations and various other tasks of municipal finance that they need to be trained on. As you know, a lot of our finance department, very few have municipal finance experience. So that created a huge gap in knowledge as well as far as our finances go because of that. But we are moving towards hiring other people within the finance department with municipal background, working on a system, Ms. Lazier, and achieving her goal. It's the city's wish to bring in a finance director, and we have an ongoing search. I would tell you that's very, very difficult for us. And the difficulty of that search is simply nobody wants to put their CPA on the line at this point to work for the city of Opa-locka, regardless of the amount of money we're offering. Myself and the commission have been in extensive conversations. Do we want to raise the salary more? Do we want to keep the positions out there? Kind of how we want to do it. My level is to keep the salary the way it is, and we'll find the right person for the right job at the right time, and not force it. And so Ms. Lazier has been very, very supportive of that because my goal is to bring in a finance director while Ms. Lazier, Mr. Anthony are here so we can do a solid, succinct, and very coordinated turnover of the finance department. The issue is you have finance directors coming in and out. There's no transition. Even with the manager's office and me coming in, some of you all may be aware, I know Brian Hunter is aware. I didn't even have a transition when I came in as city manager. Literally the city manager before me left on a Friday. I started on a Monday and I had to hit the ground running. If you all have noticed, the city has been getting a lot of positive PR as of the last 3 to 6 months. Positive news articles about the strides the city is making, a lot of things that my administration is doing within the city manager's office in regards to, number one, being very transparent in our finances and what we're doing, and being very direct and open as far as the defense of the city. As you all may know, everybody has something to say about Opa-locka, that be negative, positive, or indifferent. My job is to be very neutral. If there's negative news to share, I'll share that negative news. As positive as possible, and as indifferent as indifferent. But at the end of the day, government is supposed to be transparent and open. Government is supposed to serve the taxpayers and business owners. You all know the structure of Opa-locka, about 50% residential, another 50% commercial and industrial. So we do have industrial partners in our businesses out there that we have to keep in these buildings so we can collect a large amount of that tax dollar, because the large amount of that tax dollar are coming from these businesses, these large warehouses and various different things like that. As far as public works goes and capital improvement, I'll let Mr. Austin talk on that momentarily. We've been paving streets. We're out here hitting the ground, getting these streets together. We're out here, doing the assessments for our water infrastructure. Miles of street. We've done miles and miles and miles of street over the last 2 years. Mr. Austin will give an update on that and what we're looking at there. So there's a strong and succinct plan to move the city in a direction that's positive, that's open, and that's not confrontational or controversial, which I think is very, very imperative and important. So those are the kind of things we look at. I personally asked for this meeting because we all haven't met since July. We have a budget coming online that we're working on. We have a 5-year plan that's about to come online September timeframe, late September, early October timeframe. So I really wanted to get the input from the Financial Emergency Board as far as number one, looking at our budget. Number two, looking at the progress that we made and knowing that the city is making strides to fulfill those goals that we've been doing. And just be realistic with you, the city really did not start on recovering the city until 2 years ago, even though the city got into financial emergency in 2016. So that is very noteworthy. That has to be put out there in the public, to the media, and various other entities that kind of look at us. As you all are aware, we had a strong stance that the city took in regards to it being dissolved and taken over. The city's narrative was never kind of put out there. The only narrative that people use are narratives from 4 or 5 years ago, and not narratives of the current. And you know, we are still getting beaten up for the sins of the past, unfortunately, and that's something we just have to deal with as a municipal governmental organization, because that's just what it is. So we're reshaping our image. We brought in a marketing and media affairs individual to help us with our press releases and putting out a positive PR about the city and engaging our stakeholders, because as you all are aware, we have very diverse backgrounds within the city of Opa-locka. And so we want to make sure that we kind of hit everybody in the city in a very fair and equitable manner, and not just one group of people. And with my report, I will have Mr. Austin go over his projects that he has going on and in building related projects that he's dealing with currently. Following her is Ms. Lazier. And following Ms. Lazier will be Mr. Anathan, the budget administrator. Mr. Austin.
Thank you, sir. Ari Austin, Public Works and CIP Director. Our main focus right now is trying to be in compliance with Miami-Dade environmental policies. And that's our pump stations we currently have 4 of them that are out of compliance. We're making strides to address and bring them out of moratorium by November of this year. Like the manager said, we just hired some consultants, and we've engaged 2 of them thus far. One to review the previously developed design for the Cairo Lane project. We hope to move on that project and have it resolved by next December. I know it's almost like a leery thing to say when we're going to close that project out, but we must close this project out. It's been hanging out there for too long. So we're working to get closure to that. Milling and resurfacing, we continue to address our city streets to the point where potholes are slowly becoming a thing of the past. This year, we're going to mill and resurface 6.5 miles of roadway. In addressing the upcoming SMART plan, we're going to be doing installation of 2.5 miles of sidewalk. We also having a consultant review our drainage plan to come up with a priority for installing drainage as needed around our city limits. We have some funding available in our stormwater to take on that challenge and start draining some of our streets to mitigate our flooding concern, for which we declared an emergency for flooding citywide. So we're trying to address that. We currently have contractor working on one of our community centers, rehabilitating that facility. And for our historic city hall project, we are doing an assessment of the structural integrity so we could restart that project and get it resolved. That's some highlights from what we are trying to accomplish this year. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Mr. Chair, this is Frank.
Sir, Mr. Ross.
Harry, have the poles been moved on Cairo Lane?
Frank, the majority of the poles have been moved. FPL is saying they're having a hard time getting contractors to come out during this time to get the work completed, but we're working to get that resolved, and hopefully it will be resolved before the work resumes on that roadway.
So the trenching that needs to be done is still not, that they're not going to mobilize until all those poles are moved.
Well, they cannot mobilize until we have a determination if the previous design is doable under the new contract that we are going to develop. The state have asked us to verify that the design is adequate enough to move forward before we move forward again.
The design for the drainage?
The drainage, the whole project, they wanted the design vetted to ensure that it's constructible.
So the design was the design that was permitted.
Correct.
So the design was permitted, and now the state wants to verify that the design is good?
Yeah, because as you recall, the contractor that designed the original project, he opted out of the contract.
Wow.
So we have to put the project back out to bid. So before doing that, we would like to verify that the design is adequate.
So who's going to be responsible for the engineering signed and sealed drawings?
That's going to be a part of the new contractor along with the engineer that's reviewing the current design.
So part of the project has been built under the other engineer, is that correct?
Correct, yes. He has to still hold what he did. So he's going to still be the engineer of record for the portion that has been built.
And we'll have a new engineer of record for the balance.
Correct.
So part of the drainage is done under one engineer of record and part's going to be done under another?
Yes, sir.
And the new engineer is going to accept the work that was done by the previous engineer, so we don't have a finger pointing when the water doesn't flow correctly?
That's the intent. That's the intent.
Well, that should be clear in that contract that he's going to review the previous work and sign on that he accepts that work that's been done to this point. I
Yes,
mean, what we don't want to find is the new engineer finds problems with the previous work after he starts working.
that's why we go in this route, Frank. We want to make sure that the engineer record is accepting of the liabilities that are involved.
What's happened down by the canal? Still the same mess?
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Mr. Austin, I know you mentioned this a minute ago, but what's the timeline on that with the contractual work? And then you said did I hear you say you were thinking about closing out at a certain period? So what was the timeline?
We're looking to have the project wrapped up by next December.
Okay.
And according to the schedule of values, that's a manageable time frame.
You're saying the December coming, not December 2021.
2021.
2021.
Yes, sir, because we have to go to bid and that's going to take at least 25 days.
Does the new guy have to do design drawings from the scratch on the part he's going to do, or is he going to build off the drawings that are already there?
That's the intent. We're going to have the drawings that are already there vetted to ensure that they're constructible and viable.
Wow.
Well, just one quick note there. I know since that does extend out, throughout the remainder of this fiscal year and then the next. So we just want to make sure that that's reflected in the budget and sort of all the financial documents. That's just an obvious point, but one that's worth stating there.
And yes, it does. Mr. Annington is going to speak to that.
And I offer again to help with Florida Power and Light and getting those poles moved if somebody asks.
I'm going to take you up on that, Frank. I'm going to take you up on that.
Send me an email with some background of what we need and let me reach out to Florida Power and Light and see what I can do.
Will do, sir.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Mr. Manager, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Can we touch on how much roadway we've had paved in the last 2 years and some of the projects we've done over the last 6 or 8 months?
We've paved, over the last 2 years, we've paved 10 miles of roadway, 10 linear miles. We've removed from moratorium thus far approximately 10 pump stations. Like I said, we have 4 remaining in moratorium, and we hope to get those out of moratorium by November of this year. That's it so far, sir.
Good. Just for my own edification there, I probably knew the statistics at one point, but that's a fair amount of repaving given the entire surface paved area in the whole city, correct? That's actually a fairly large portion. Or-
Yes, it is. Yes, it
Okay.
is. The remaining portions are going to be addressed with the capital projects for stormwater and wastewater infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Ms. Lazier, if you can provide your finance update.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, board members and guests. So I want to highlight a few things that we've been working on. Obviously, one of the pride and joys of the department is recently completing the fiscal 18 audit on May 14th. The city is also currently working on putting together an RFP to competitively solicit the upcoming audits that will take place. Currently, Mr. Brunson performed the audits for the last 3 years. And so now we recently also passed legislation by resolution to create the audit committee. And so the audit committee will be in place in time to be able to assist the city in selecting and evaluating a firm to go forward with the next few audits, either a single year or multi-year contract. But we're looking right now at a few RFPs that we found with other cities to see if we can formulate something that can best fit the city based on the current times. We also are working to create a timeline similar to what we have done in the past for the audit based on the work that we believe that needs to be done to prepare to get ready for the fiscal 19 audit, so that by the time the new auditor is selected, we can begin to start doing the work simultaneously. So we're doing the work right now in anticipation to that when a new firm is selected, that will be ready to go for the 19 audit as well. I think I just mentioned that we passed legislation. I think it was the last commission meeting. We passed legislation for the new audit committee that's going to be selected. We also recently finalized 3 years backlog for the CITT audits. That's the surtax dollars through Miami-Dade County for the transportation and transit portion. We received about $901,000 just from the closeout of those prior year audits. We also waited until we completed the fiscal 18 audit to reach out to Miami-Dade counties for them to begin the fiscal 18 audit. They will not begin on the surtax audits until we've actually completed our financial audits first. So we've been in touch with Kathy Jackson at Miami-Dade County, and they have started on the fiscal 18 audit, and we're working with them currently now just to make sure that we go through some of the inquiry that they have so that we can try to wrap this audit as well. We're hoping we can wrap this audit prior to beginning the 19 audit so that we're not having to work on 2 audits at the same time. We also, some other news, we've also closed out a few grants that we had pending from the prior years. We closed out the EPA grant and a grant that the city had with the South Florida Transportation Authority, where we brought in about $250,000 into the coffers because of those closeouts. I think the manager touched on this a little bit earlier, but we are still recruiting for the finance director and the senior accountant. Those job descriptions are out there. However, one of the things that we're noticing is that we were not getting a lot of good quality applicants. The few that we did receive, we did a few interviews, but I don't know if any of them were that successful. However, we are still trying to see if we can get some resumes in the door to see if we can identify folks that have the municipal government experience needed to be able to really work on some of the work that needs to be done and produce quality work. One of the things that I recommended to the manager is that FGFOA has a lot of training available to government finance officers and employees. And so we are recommending for each member of the team to get a membership through FGFOA. It's such a small cost for the team members to be affiliated with FGFOA. And FGFOA also has training throughout the year. I think there's one coming up in October. They may do it remotely. We're recommending for staff to be able to participate in the School of Accounting to be able to assist them in updating their capacity and so on and so forth. We also recommended that they purchase the governmental accounting booklets and provide each staff with one so they could have it as a form of reference for the work that they're supposed to be producing. Another thing that we've been working on is creating a monthly operational plan. Most finance departments have some sort of routine monthly process where everyone is accountable for producing different things within the department. And so we've done that. We introduced that to the team after we completed the fiscal 18 audit. And so now they're trying to get the hang of some monthly routine in terms of preparing different account reconciliations and the bank reconciliations. I'm really proud to say that we created a new process where we were able to train 3 of the staff on how to prepare the bank reconciliations to fit the city. And we've been able to finalize between 5 to 10 different bank recs. So we're definitely making significant progress, but we are behind, obviously. But we are working on the fiscal 19 bank recs, and we're hoping to be able to finalize all 24 bank accounts. There's 24 accounts. So doing a bank reconciliation for 12 months for each year, for each account, it's going to take some time, but we're hoping that we can finalize them by September. That's the internal goal that we've given ourselves. We are also working on the operational audit. That's something that Mr. Anathan has the responsibility of managing and coordinating with all of the departments. And so finance is working on the findings that were related to finance and coming up with different policies and procedures that we're recommending to enhance the process and also training the staff on. We're also trying to make sure that the policies make sense in terms of the staff capacity and what we have available here. Lastly, I'd say, I don't think the manager mentioned this earlier, but one of the things that I think that's a highlight for the city is that they were able to successfully negotiate the withholding of funds by the City National Bank, which was upwards over $5 million. And so half of those proceeds were deposited into the city's coffers, into the general fund is where they'll be allocated. And the other half was used to pay down some of the 2015 debt, bond debt that the city has, which will be reflected in the fiscal 21 audit as of seeing that not fiscal 21, fiscal 20 audit when it does take place, since it just currently happened. So I think that's a big success. We were able to write down debt for $2.5 million and also brought in $2.5 million or so, give or take, into the general fund. So that is my report. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Mr. Manager, please go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, what's your position?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Jerry Lazar, contracted finance director, I'd say.
Okay.
So
Okay.
My firm, Trimridge Consulting Group, has a contract with the city. We have 3 support staff, which includes myself, that's here assisting the city. I have a manager and a senior who's assisting with the financial reporting, account reconciliation, management and oversight, reviewing, providing training, and those sorts of things in the absence of there being a finance director. We're also support to the departments and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
I did just want to pause there for a second. And, I live in a very similar world as you do in the organization I serve. And I like to congratulate myself on my ability to understate things and sort of and just kind of keep an even keel. Like literally everything you said there is such a positive improvement. Like it's oftentimes the things that are so routine and so everyday that it can be forgotten about that I see in my office, but literally everything you said there is going to improve the audit at some point in the future. So, the day in, day out reconciliation, all of that, good documentation of what is and how what is going to make the future audit, quite easy by comparison. So, everything you said, and it's amazing amount of work, and in a very short period of time, you rattled off like what I consider to be some of the, the key elements with just not only running a good operation, but just kind of, oftentimes in my finance world, people forget that myself and my team are here doing that. But when you're absent that team, it becomes apparent. So I know that the work that you're doing and really the learning and that knowledge that you're passing on enable like not only the 5-year recovery plan, but also, many years after that, that knowledge to be, operationalized every day. So I just take a minute, and I'm sure the city manager would say the same thing, like incredible amount of work, and it doesn't go unnoticed amongst this crew here.
Thank you. And it's a team effort. The group is really working well as a team. We're coming together. It's taken some time, but we're working through it. And I'm really proud of the team just to be able to get this far. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that report. And I am one that's very humble, so I don't celebrate my achievements. I think my team, overall, a very humble group of people, and we just do a day-to-day job, and that's how we call it. And there are a lot of amazing things that we do on a daily basis, a lot of things that we kind of uncover on a daily or weekly basis as far as operational issues. The biggest thing I can say as a city manager, and being a previous city manager, compared to where I came from, compared to be here in Opa-locka, you learn something every day. There's always something in a closet hidden somewhere that you kind of find out about, and you gotta jump on and deal with immediately, either through a letter saying you're imminent, going to be sued, or somebody making a phone call about trying to contact staff 2 years ago about an issue. And we even had situations, somebody calling and says, hey, I've been trying to pay you money for the last year or so, and I haven't been able to contact you to pay money. Seriously. So these are the ebb and flow and kind of how we deal with it. It's an everyday basis, because Opa-locka has so much history, both positive, negative, and different. So, like I said, Jerry and Robert Anathan, very humbled individuals. I would tell you, Mr. Anathan puts in more hours than the average person to get the job done. And like I said, his presence with the city is wholeheartedly appreciated. And I'm going to let him speak at this point and kind of talk about things in his wheelhouse, because I do not want him to beat me over the head and say I said the wrong thing. So I'm going to let him take that part of it.
Very wise.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let him start his presentation on budget, and if you could touch on operational audit too, Bob, and procurement as well, that'd be great.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Bob Anathan, budget guy. I'm going to embarrass myself by trying to take over the screen, so bear with me. We've done this a couple of times, so maybe I can get it right this time. Nelson, you're going to help me out if I don't.
Looking good on my end. Looks like a successful share.
Well, so far, but I think I have more steps, and I'm looking for the next icon and I don't see it. So let me figure out where it went to, or if Nelson will be kind enough to step in and bail me out, that would be nice.
Just above the word insert, Bob. On top left.
I must have missed a step because top left. I'm top left. I'm looking at the Zoom screen right now, and I don't think I should be.
No, you look for the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well,
right there. Look at the little screen with the play button on it.
Are we talking? What is this?
Oh no, close that.
Yeah, that's a no-no. No, there was a step in between. I was supposed to see something in the lower right, and that didn't go away, or that didn't show up. So bear with me. We'll get this thing worked out. I apologize for wasting everybody's time. Oh, Nelson, you said at the insert button is where I
go up
above. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, there's a step in between that I was supposed to do. I didn't do, but I ended up here anyhow, so we're good. Okay, and we're going to take full screen. We're good. Thank you. We're good.
Right there.
Yep. Hello, I'm back in business. 2 minutes late. Excuse me, the door was left open. I'm going to close. Can you close the door? Thank you. Okay. All right, now that I've had everybody rush to the front door to bail me out, and we're good. Good afternoon. As I said, Bob Anathan, budget guy. This actually works out very well because you're going to see a budget we're going to submit in about 2.5 weeks. I'd like to focus on the front screen for a moment because note that the front screen talks about a workshop on the 16th of July. At this point, this will be a workshop we're going to do Thursday night. At this point, we're supposed to have run 3 of the commissioners through the proposed budget, the staff budget. Because of COVID-19 incident yesterday, only one has actually been through it. So long story short, what you're seeing today is going to be the staff recommendation. There's going to be a workshop next Thursday. And then shortly after that, there will be on the 22nd, there will be a commission meeting, and they'll provide direction on what they want in the budget. And that will be the budget that will be submitted to you within the week after that. So again, this is the budget you're going to see today is just the staff recommendation. It does not represent the commission providing final direction on it. So with that, we will move down the road. Very brief agenda. The accomplishments are going to be shorter than I intended because everybody's talked to all the accomplishments already. So you'll see them on the list. We'll not spend much time on several of them, and then we'll move on to FY21. Not on here also is a tail of this will be a real brief discussion. Brian mentioned concern about the procurement ordinance, and I'll segue from one to the other right away unless anybody has any questions. Ground rule, if at any point I say something that doesn't make sense, please stop me because I don't want to waste your time. That way I think we can have a productive give and take to get done what I'd like to share with you today. So this is a calendar that we have. By the way, everybody, happy Bastille Day. No guillotines here, but I think some equally exciting stuff. As I said, we're going to have the workshop on the 16th. We're going to have the adoption of the preliminary budget on the 22nd. And you all should see the budget on the 1st of August. This is a very useful conversation because budget book's about 195 pages. I think this is going to lend some context to what we're talking about.
Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt. We lost your screen there.
Yeah. Okay. Am I back? Do you have the PowerPoint? Is PowerPoint gone?
Just reshare it. No, just reshare it.
Okay, back we go. Okay, so we're going back to there, and we're going back to there. And
looks good.
Looks good.
Okay, good. Let me. But do you have the big picture, the small entire screen?
It looks good, Bob.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, so long story short, I think this is a very productive opportunity to share with you everything that A, has been accomplished this year, and B, where we think the budget should go next year, at least as we recommend it, not necessarily as the commission approves it. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, I can't, my keyboard doesn't allow me to step down, so let's see if we, okay, so we'll do it this way. Okay, has already been mentioned by the manager, the interim finance director, and the public works director. We've got an awful lot done this year. I think it was going to be a really good year up through March. COVID-19 has come, has created a tremendous amount of uncertainty, as I'll discuss in a little bit. Even with that, I think it's still going to be a very good year, as I'll share with you as we go down through the presentation. We did enjoy what was initially publicized as a 30% growth in our tax base for the current year. It got shaved a little bit by the Value Assessment Board, but 29% still not too shabby. As you all know, the county has taken over the billing of the utilities, and that has been a real success. The revenue this year, it looks like it's going to be up 58% over the same customer set billings in FY18. So it's catching up for some problems that were created by prior administration, and it certainly is moving in the right direction. We'll start to produce enough surplus revenue that we can look very seriously at some investment opportunities. Jerry mentioned a few moments ago that the bank bank holds notes on the acquisition of the city municipal complex building. With the announcement of the financial emergency, there was certain surplus pledge funds that were supposed to go to the city each month. They froze that and retained it by June and grown up to 5.2 million. As Jerry said, that's been released, and half of it went into the general fund. Half of it went in as a prepayment, takes a $6 million balloon payment that is going to occur in FY26, cuts in half. It's a real vote of confidence on the part of the bank, so we take it as a real feather in our cap. As Jerry mentioned, audits are moving forward. She also mentioned the 900,000 from the county having to do with roadway improvement. Even with some reduced revenue this year, we're still looking at $4.7 million of infrastructure improvement investment. First and foremost is the relining of 4 of the collection basins that the Public Works Director alluded to. They have been or will be relined shortly. Then it's a question of satisfying the other county requirements in regard to environmental concerns, and then the moratorium they had imposed on new connections should be lifted. Has been mentioned 6.5 miles of roadway, 2.6 miles of resurfacing. Also, as Jerry alluded to, moving forward on policy procedures, both in regard to responding to the operational audits, but there are other situations that arise, and those are also being documented so that we don't backslide into where we were a couple of years ago. Service delivery, we're keep on delivering service, possibly not quite to the level we'd like to. I will show you at one point we're dealing with 39% less staff than we had half a dozen years ago. So it's in my estimation, it's a pretty lean organization right now. All major funds are forecast to generate surplus. By major funds, I'm talking about the general fund, water sewer fund, and the stormwater fund. The water sewer fund and the general fund, as I'll show you, I think are both going to be in excess of $2 million, and we'll look at that a little bit further. I don't know if you know it, but the city initiated working with the county and possibly with the state government, initiated the first walk-up COVID-19 testing facility in the county, which was a major step forward. I think we're up to, started slow, I think we're up to in excess of 400 people a day. Very importantly, as was discussed between Frank and the Public Works Director, taking another look at the Stormwater Master Plan to make sure our priorities are correct and we can start moving forward. You will see some of that movement in FY21. What has not been mentioned so far is also the initiation of a downtown master plan under the auspices of the CRA. And that's going to be very powerful in providing direction exactly where the city wants to go, what it wants to do, what it doesn't want to do. Lesser activities, but not insignificant. $410,000 invested in restoring a park that should be online at the latter part of this calendar year. Equally important is the FPL is going to be installing high-intensity LED streetlights throughout the city, which is twofold. One, obviously, the safety aspects of it. Secondarily, the city has become somewhat of a target for illegal dumping, and through the additional illumination, it's going to be a lot tougher for these folks to come through in the middle of the night to do what they have to do. So we'll talk about that a little bit further. And final on the list is close to $100,000 is going to go into a community center to totally renovate the air conditioning system. Okay, so that was a little bit of a very small victory lap, but you're only as good. Well, there's a phrase: you're only as good as your last time at bat. But in reality, next time at bat's going to be even more important. So we're going to take a look at FY21 right now. Okay, talking points here. This is a citywide summary of what the budget has as in totality. I'd like to bring your attention to possibly 4 categories. There are 5 categories. The revenue is going to be down in FY21. You can see the negative 2.4 in the upper right column. It's in part due to COVID-19. It's also in part to some anomalies in water sewer, which I'll cover later. Equally important is if you come down about 4 lines, you'll see the transfers in are going to be down about 2.5 million. Got a tremendous boot, as I mentioned a couple months ago, and as Jerry mentioned before me, when the bank released $2.6 million that came into the general fund. That was unfortunately a one-time event, so the transfers in are going to be down 2.5 million, which takes away funding for what we have to do. On the expense side, if I can get you to travel down to the capital line, you can see the difference really taking off, and that very heavily so in the water sewer fund, and we'll cover that in more detail. The last thing I'd like to bring to your attention on this page is at the bottom of the proposed budget, where you can see a overage, or actually a under of $2.7 million in terms of expenditures over funding. What we're doing there is you have 2 funds that have very healthy fund balances, and we're going to take advantage of it. 800,000 is in a fund that's involved with roadway renewal. 2 million of it has to do, or actually 1.9 has to do with the stormwater fund, and we'll look at that in more detail. But this is kind of a view at 40,000 feet. If there are any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on. Okay, again, at the city level, you can see, and I've used FY14, and the reason I used FY14, I couldn't find FY15, but I suspect it was the same. What you're really talking to is a reduction of full, and focusing primarily on full-time. 204 were in the budget for FY14. In reality, for FY20, we're talking 124 and a half. So that's about a 40% reduction. Equally important, well, 2 things on this. For FY21, we are proposing some growth. You can see recommended 6 additions in the governmental in the governmental funds, 3 of which have to do with getting finance fully up to speed. 2 in Parks and Rec because of park is coming back on, and they actually lost several people. And then 1 person in roads, and that has to do with focusing on the illegal dumping that's been going on here. Enterprise funds are a little more healthy, and we've proposed another 6.5 people there. So in total, 6.5, in total 12.5 proposed additions to where we are at the moment. And probably equally important is the column to the right, because as I said, the service levels aren't quite to the level we'd like them to be. Staff has requested additional 11 positions full-time, 2 part-time. They have not been brought in because of revenue concerns, primarily in the general fund. So it's not as though we opened the door and said, come on down and put everybody aboard you want. We tried to be very judicious in who we actually brought on board. Okay, this is a roadmap. I just want to take a moment to just explain to you how the city has organized its funds. In the governmental funds, there are 9, which are listed on this page. The next page will have 2. Just want to give you some sense of what they're about, so that hopefully the numbers have a little more meaning when we take a look at them. General fund, obviously, is the alpha dog here. It is primary expenditure. Again, the numbers in parentheses are the recommended expenditures for FY21, just to give you order of magnitude as the relationship between the different funds. Obviously, the primary source of revenue for the general fund is going to be your property tax. And when you get down to it, this is really the fund that provides essentially all city services other than what you have in your utility accounts, water, sewer, and stormwater. Second on the list is your CRA, $1 million. This is really going to be an engine for building up your tax base. It's funded by city and county property tax. Those numbers are already known with certainty for next year. In fact, the county has already sent us a confirmation email saying, in fact, the numbers we're using were spot on with what they're going to pay us in December. This fund is at the moment responsible for redevelopment of 18% of the city, which is deemed to be blighted. There's some things going on that, in fact, the 18% may become a larger percent in the future, possibly. Debt service is kind of a strange one. This is the one, it relates to what we were talking about before, about the release of 5.2 million, 2.6 into general fund. This is funded by miscellaneous taxes and state revenue sharing. It's covering 1.2 million of notes and bonds. It does not pick up any of the enterprise debt, which is another, at the moment, 1.9 million. To the extent that the revenue sources are going to be impacted by COVID-19, which we truly believe they will be, it's just going to mean that less money is going to come out of this fund and go back into the general fund after the debt service is taken care of. Next one we call Safe Neighborhood, which is kind of cryptic. I've been here 5 months, haven't broken code on why they do that. But this was really the source of funding or the source of activity for any and all CIP work other than some roadway development, which I'll talk about in a moment, and whatever goes on in terms of water, sewer, and stormwater investment. You can see this year's number is very small. When I say this year, I should really say next year, 0.2 million. And that's a statement of the fact that gasoline taxes are going to be down. In a good year, it's not a huge number. And when we're actually able to do something, it's because we've been able to secure other grants. And also the general fund has had some flexibility to be able to provide sourcing, neither of which is going to occur in the budget as we see it at the moment for next year. Coming down the list, you've got what's called the People's Transportation Plan. This is monies provided by the county through a surtax that they've imposed on sales tax. And it is to use strictly for roadway improvement. And the money we're going to get next year is going to be a little bit less than the 1.4 million that you see on this heading. But this is one of the two funds that actually has a very healthy fund balance. And the recommendation is going to be to take advantage of it. Coming down the list, we're down to number 6 now. Town Center really refers to the building we're in right now, the Municipal Center Complex. It was bought, I think, in 2015 or 2016. The purpose, this is really part of the general fund, but it's really been carved out because the premise when it was originally bought was that it was going to be essentially self-sufficient through rental income and therefore be no burden on the city. As we'll see, that has not quite worked out that way, and we'll tell you what we're doing to try and correct that situation. You got something called a special law enforcement fund, which is it's funded by DOJ through seizure funds and other things. At the moment, we have no plans to spend money there. The chief advises that it is very restricted in the categories it can be spent for. It will be looked at further, but at the moment, essentially, it's no hits, no runs, and no errors for this fund. The last two that are embedded in the governmental funds are 2 internal service funds. You've got an IT fund, which really, well, both funds, obviously, by definition, being internal service funds, are funded 100% by the various departments, various divisions within the city. The IT internal service fund, as the name would imply, is there to allocate out all of the IT charges that you're looking at. Most of the 700,000 that's indicated there as intended expenditure relates to either communication via voice or internet or software licenses. And we'll look a little more detail at that. Risk management is 2.7. Of that, 2.6 is really all insurance related costs. So these are the 9 funds that compose governmental funds. We're going to work our way through each one of them, spend a couple minutes on it. Any questions, or can I just move on? Hearing none, I will move on.
Yeah, please do. That's very, very helpful.
Yeah, because the budget book I put together, it finally came together at the latter part of last week, and I looked at it and said, my God, there are way too many numbers, and there were no really good roadmaps to really be explicit in terms of what we're trying to do here. So just put this in just to try and make sure everybody has some sense of where we're trying to take the budget. The remaining 2 funds are on the enterprise side, and as you would expect, the Water Sewer Fund, which is an interesting division of labor. It is funded primarily by our water and sewer customers, and it's also is able to obtain, on certain times, grants and loans for infrastructure investment. And you'll see that as we get that funded in more detail. Interesting enough, the county provides our bulk water. They do our wastewater processing. They also do our customer billing. We maintain the infrastructure for water distribution and wastewater collection and transmission. And to a certain extent, we address limited customer service issues. Stormwater fund, and at the moment, I will tell you the stormwater fund is probably the most healthy fund we have, and I'll show that in more detail. It's funded by assessment to all developed properties and also obtains grants and loans for infrastructure improvement. And the duty of the fund is, as you would expect, is to maintain and improve infrastructure for stormwater drainage. So with that, we will start getting into the general fund. These are the major budget assumptions for the general fund. Tax.
Can I interrupt here for just a second? This is
Please
Frank.
do. Yes, sir.
I've got another meeting at 4. I don't know how long this is going to proceed. What happens if I vacate and we lose a quorum? Is there any other action that the board has to take before I go bye-bye?
No, there's that, Frank, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. There is no official votes that we anticipate taking at this point. So if you have to drop off, please do. I know after this, we'll just continue the discussion and then talk about sort of the 5-year plan and sort of continue on with some additional staff guidance that we might be able to provide. So I don't believe there'll be any more official actions, Frank. So I think you should be in the clear.
All right, cool. The one thing I just make comment on before I go bye-bye is that I have reviewed extensively the new procurement ordinance that the city has put into place, and it's pretty good. In fact, I think it's great. And it got rid of a lot of the redundancy. It got rid of a lot of the conflicts. And so I think that Robert had a big piece in putting this together because we talked about it at one point. But it's really a big step forward in clarifying responsibilities and not contradicting itself in different areas. So kudos to whoever put it together and the commission approving it and the direction of the manager and whatever, but it's a big step forward on the procurement side.
I would agree.
I will butt out and listen.
Yeah, I definitely second your observation there. That was a pretty good clarity document, and like everything else that we've seen and we'll continue to see in the presentation here, just truly coming in line with some very good standardized approaches, and hopefully being able to set it up that then becomes that day-to-day operational expectation that we talked about earlier. But
one other point I want to make, because again, I'm sorry, but I know that we have some officers that have been exposed with COVID, and I ran into the police chief the other day out in the field, and I want to make sure that the commission is aware that the county has a non-congregate hotel that we will house these officers and first responders who become exposed and do not want to go home to expose their family, or they're waiting for their results of their tests or whatever. And so we have that. It's at no cost to Opa-locka or any of the municipalities. And if I know they're aware of it, but sometimes the elected officials are not aware that these things are available. And they are certainly available to protect these people from spreading that COVID to their families. And we're glad that we're able to offer that service to at this time. It's a pretty tough time and difficult, especially for the smaller municipalities, to come up with this kind of a resource. So we, through the mayor of the county, we put this together for all the municipalities, and not only are we running them now, but we're running some hospital people too that are discharged from the hospital to free up COVID beds, but they're not well enough to go back to a nursing home, or they can't go back to a nursing home. So we're housing them also. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware this facility was available. Okay, now I'm done.
That's actually really good to hear, Frank. I've dealt with this issue here in northern Florida, but obviously, as I've reiterated to, not only the governor's office and everybody that I talk to, the situation, especially over here where we are, pales in comparison from what you were experiencing day to day down there in South Florida. And every time I talk with my colleague, Rick Beasley there with Career Source South Florida, it's just apparent the the actual reality of what you guys are living day to day. And I certainly am appreciative that the county is offering that, because that's super important. So thank you. So yeah, let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. Frank, thanks for the comments on the procurement. In the spirit of expediting the presentation, you just took out the last 2 pages, and thank you very much. Okay, I think we were at actually, I'm not sure I actually got into. Anyhow, tax-based growth of 8%. Those are the county numbers, so there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Our tax base is a little different than a lot of places. 20% of it is composed of personal property, much of which is related to Amazon. So on the real estate side, we saw about 11% growth. On the personal property side, about a 2% growth. Great to have Amazon aboard, but that's not an area where we get a lot of growth. So that's going to be an issue going forward. Very quickly, use a collection rate of 95%. History has been, when you add up all the payment plans, everything else, it seems to come in around 95%. Obviously, it's going to be real tough this year for a lot of people to be paying their tax bills, but what doesn't get paid is going to go to tax certificate sales, and I believe we're going to get it. I think we're going to see the impact on the next year with depressed property value, but anyhow, I've used 95% for the moment. For every percentage point I'm off, it's going to cost the city about $113,000. Millage rate is, we have recommended the same as before, and a 1/10 of a mil, if anybody is curious, is about $110,000. So depending on what the commission wants to do, that may or may not enter into the budget that gets submitted by the 1st of August. Next one is self-evident. We're dealing with COVID-19, really in the dark in terms of revenue. I'll explain that further in a moment. We talked about the limited headcount growth, no compensation increase other than police contract. Put in a 10% increase in health benefits. That's kind of standard. You do it every year, and then you're happy when it doesn't come in. Not a major swinger. 1 percentage point is about $7,500. As you'll see, most of the other expenses have been held at or below FY20 levels. At the moment, have 1.4 million of contingency to try and keep the budget out of trouble. FRS new rates we got about a week and a half ago. They're implemented, had very minimal impact. Somewhere up, somewhere down. They mostly watch that. Long story short, a balanced budget, no use of fund balance. I don't see, as I said, the city this year, I think, is going to do very well at improving the general fund unassigned fund balance. With the revenue so unknown for next year, I really don't see any upside. The downside may be if the revenue really is even far more horrific than I think it was. So more on that in a moment. Okay, to get back aboard. Here we go. Okay, this is kind of the same format that we looked at in terms of the citywide budget. The key things here that I'll bring to your attention, let me start left to right. At the bottom, at the moment, based on what's available to me, I think there's going to be about a $2.6 million surplus on the general fund side, which if materialized is going to be great. If you look above it, you'll see another $1 million of contingency, 1086, etc. If not all of that's going to fall, some of that will get used by the time the dust settles, and hopefully all of it won't get used because we won't get sideswiped by a hurricane. But if some portion of that does fall down to the bottom line, then it could be even better than what I thought it was going to be. The other things that I'll bring to your attention are in terms of, in the rightmost column, the over and under forecast for FY21. It's again, as we talked about before, the transfers in are going to be way down in comparison this year, that all having to do with the release of funds by the bank. You can see as I come down that column, compensation is going to be up a little bit over this year, 6 people plus slightly more in benefits. Operating expense, other uses, and capital, all down. Again, as I said before, most expenses are at or below FY20 levels. Contingency is up out of prudence, and the transfers out is going to be down slightly. So what we're offering is a balanced budget, and I'll share with you in a moment what we want to do with that budget and also some of my concerns on it. Before we get there, So where does the $17 million go that we're proposing that the general fund should spend this year? 6.2 million of it is in something called non-departmental. This is really a clearinghouse. What it does is it is the repository where all the transfers out to the other funds, such as what goes to your risk management fund, what goes to your IT services fund, and so forth, is embedded here. And that's about $3.2 million. Also, what you have in here is the $1.4 million of contingency. And this is all also where the red light camera payments are. So that is what we have in the budget at the moment. The next bigger number there, as I come down the FY21 proposed budget, is the $900,000 for finance. And again, that is to get finance fully up to staff, get all of the equipment they feel they need, get in the training they feel they need, and really by the end of the year have a finance organization that really is able to exercise excellent fiduciary responsibility. Then the last one, no surprise, is going to be the police department with a budget in aggregate of about $4.8 million. So that's where the $17.6 million is proposed to be expended. Oops, can't use that one, so we'll use this one. This is my soapbox, because fund balance has not always been a focus item here. And it's obviously very central to restoring this city to where it has to be in terms of exiting from state financial control. The audit that was completed at the end of May indicated that the general fund unassigned fund balance was about negative 4 million, a few cents under that, but essentially that number. Based on what I can see, the information available to me, my estimate, and my estimate alone, is that it's going to be about 600,000 better coming into this year. So my opening estimated balance is a negative 3.3. As I said, a good, unfortunately not as good as could be due to COVID-19, but certainly a good year. Should get that down to, my estimate is down the negative 700,000. As I said, for FY21, a balanced budget, neither using nor adding to fund balance this time. So therefore no change. But this is something that I continually get on my soapbox for, because people keep looking at the $2.6 million over here and say, oh, look, we can spend some money because we have an excess. But the reality is we've got a long way to go in terms of getting to that target of 3. Oh, I didn't even mention, I apologize. Target, when you use government financial officer accounting standards, is for a city this size, we should have a unassigned fund balance for the general fund in the range of $3 million. So I'm not here to tell you that it's going to be exactly 6.9 million coming into this year or closing this year, but it's going to be a number that certainly is not going to be at 3 million. So we certainly have a long way to go. What do we want to do with the 17.6? I've shown it how it allocates over the various divisions in the general fund. Some of these have already been alluded to by Jerry or the Public Works Director. Certainly get all caught up on the audits. That would be both FY and FY19 and FY20. We also made reference to the policies and procedures. Has to be in place if the city is going to be able to assume full fiduciary responsibility. So this is a response to the operational audit and also other issues that have arisen to say, hey, we really need some sort of policy procedures there. State is going to come back sometime October to December to take a look at the 99 audits items that they had provided the city in May of 2019. Our intent is that we are going to be squeaky clean, and whatever is sampled is going to pass. I'm sorry, I skipped one. I was thinking one thing and I got onto another. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's exactly where I want to be. Next one is we will be submitting a 5-year recovery plan. My goal is to pull it together in the next 60 days. And certainly I would hope by sometime in FY21, the state would say, yep, that's a good plan, and we can move on. Very key part of what the city wants to do next year is wrapped up into something called the IT initiative. And the intent there, we have a very capable IT director, and he really has a set of ideas as to how the technology and really change the way we do business. And he's put together a complete program to do that. We'll look at it very briefly. If you want to get in detail, I'm going to ask him to speak to it, because I ceased to be an IBM systems engineer about 30 years ago. So He's much better qualified to do it than I am. Development of comprehensive parks and recreation strategy. We got 5 parks out there. Have to make sure all the parts come together, and there really is a long-term plan in place to indicate where we're going. Obviously, one of the things the city has to do to get out of exit the state control is really have to have a major development program underway to bring a lot of additional development into the city. The downtown master plan certainly is going to be a step in channeling that in the right direction. I've alluded to the fact that this is kind of ground zero in the area for illegal dumping, and we're putting resources in place to really try and tamp down on that, so that's no longer an issue. High priority in community policing, and God forbid COVID-19 is still a threat come next year. Continue the efforts that have been exerted to make the community aware of the dangers of it and steps that ought to be taken to minimize the risk. Oops, we're backwards. Okay, I've got essentially 3 major issues that, well, really one major issue I've alluded to. Tremendous revenue uncertainty in 2 dimensions. I will give you a couple analogies to it. The state normally puts out revenue guidance on several of the revenues that they distribute to the city. Typically, they come out the latter part of June, early part of July. They've now posted on their website. Not going to tell you anything until after, certainly after July 15th. So they have not taken a stand on it yet, reflecting their uncertainty. We get guidance from the county in terms of the money that they will share for roadway improvements and so forth. Typically that comes in June or early July. We haven't gotten that yet. To make life a little more uncertainty, to get the audit done by 15th of May, the accountants had to go to the mode of cooks and laundrymen to the front. They had to really put all resource they had into getting everything done for the audit. That's the great news. The unfortunate byproduct of that is that the accounts really don't reflect where we are year to date. I should be able to go in to a revenue account and look at March, April, May, and June and say, oh, okay, that's what COVID-19 is doing to us, and extrapolate from that and start to make some educated judgments as to what's going on with revenue. Because the accounts were so wrapped up with the audit, I don't have that information. So there is a tremendous amount of revenue uncertainty built in this. In the many decades that I've done this work, I've never had a budget that's had greater revenue uncertainty to it. The unassigned fund balance we've talked about, and service delivery, as I mentioned, we have very lean staffing. We're not staffing to the level we'd like to, but that's what we have to do. Moving on to CRA. I'm sorry. One last page with regard to revenue. I just want to stay put. Okay, thank you very much. The hook has come out. I need to move more quickly. What I've done in terms of general fund revenue, property tax, I'm pretty comfortable with. We've got 3 ingredients in the revenue plan here. Property tax revenue, pretty comfortable with that unless the tax certificate sales don't materialize the way I think they're going to. One thing that I do have access to is the monthly red light camera. I get that directly from the service provider. That is still coming in very strongly even last month, and I'm assuming that's going to continue. If it falls short, about 50 or 60% of it goes to somebody else by the time we're done, so that's not a tremendous hit on revenue. Everything else is a seat of the pants number, and I've taken it down by 36%. So this is what's built into your general fund revenue. As I said, a tremendous amount of uncertainty. CRA, things I want to bring to your attention, a couple things. The revenue is pretty much a known quantity, $1 million. You have something called a trust account. That's in the third column, the highlighted number 270. That really is another way of talking about money that you're not going to spend this year. It's really going to fall into the fund balance at the end of the year. So 760, if this plan is met dollar for dollar, fund balance at the end of the year will actually be a little over $1 million. The other anomaly that I'm going to bring to your attention is the fact that the transfer out is markedly down. That is a function that in FY14 or FY13 through FY15, the administration on board at that time decided they're going to put $345,000 into CRA. I'm sorry, go ahead, George. Please don't interrupt on me a little bit. Go ahead. Okay. I'm sorry. So anyhow, that money has been returned in FY20, and that's why you see a major difference there. Things that their objectives are going to be as follows with the money they have available to next year: completion of the downtown master plan, facade program, another round of it following what's done this year. Streetscape program for the first time. We intend to update the CRA redevelopment plan. As I said, the 18% of the city is currently covered by it. They are looking at possibly expanding the area of that the plan applies to. Looking for various fund sources that will help. Looking to initiate a development of a technology district and also an entertainment district. They have offered to enhance some of the park amenities with such things as possibly shade covering and so forth to make them more usable. Got to reduce impediments to development and also finalize their policy and procedure manual. Next fund is number 3 on the list we looked at before, is going to be the debt service fund. And as I said, that after you pay your 1.2 million of debt service every year, anything above and beyond goes to the general fund. As if that revenue is as low as I think it's going to be, it's just going to deprive the general fund of some revenue. Safe Neighborhood, as I mentioned before, is the primary fund for doing governmental funds, CIP, capital improvement. Only see a very limited amount of gas tax revenue coming in next year at this time. Again, my estimate, that is dedicated to road resurfacing. Don't see any grants. General fund is not in a position to fund anything going on here in terms of investment in infrastructure. So therefore, it's a very low level budget for next year. The objectives are twofold. Probably resurface 3 lane miles. Typical road has 2, so it'll be 1.5 miles of road. And again, identify and start to apply for grants and loans. People's Transportation Plan. This is funded exclusively by by county funds. It has been somewhat volatile. There was discussion of 901,000 funds being released this year. You can see that in the first column. My cursor is pointing to it right there. See reduced funding for next year. This, as I said before, is one of the 2 funds where it has a very healthy fund balance. You can see, again, I've estimated based on what I think is going to happen in FY19 and what I knew from the FY18 audit. I think going into FY21, we're going to have close to $1 million of fund balance. Recommendation is going to be to use 683,000 of it to allow us to do several projects in here. Their objectives are going to possibly find a second source of funding, which would be external to county funds, to implement a second community bus route. That's not in the budget this time, too much uncertainty. Again, the other primary purposes are the roadway resurfacing, both in the Carroll Lane and also 1 mile of additional other roadway, and to do another 2 miles of sidewalks, again, to facilitate pedestrian traffic to public transportation connection points. Town Center. As I said, this is really part of the general fund, carved out to be allowed focus on whether the tenant rent is really getting us to break even. You can see in FY21, the general fund is going to have to contribute $430,000. Operating expenses are going to be up to $508,000. The reason for that is we took on board a tenant who was a for-profit tenant. The county said you can't do that. Consequently, we're going to incur a $160,000 property tax bill next year for the first time. The bright side of that is we will get $50,000 back but there's still steps to be taken to make sure that doesn't happen again. So that's why the general fund requirement to transfer funds in is larger than it could be and should be. The objectives that are with this activity is to hire a property manager to make sure that we really get the place fully rented the way it should be. Next objective is to get to 100% rental occupancy. The county has also recommended we divide the building into condominium units so that the only condominium units that would be receive property tax are going to be those that are occupied by for-profit tenants, which will make an awful lot of that $160,000 problem go away. We'd like to do an energy audit and also upgrade the interior conditions somewhat. Not a big program, but little painting here, little wall cleaning there, possibly some arts hanging off the walls and so forth. So just to make it provide a better positive image of the city for people who actually come into the building. Okay, that completes 7 out of the 9 funds in the governmental funds. I'll get to the last 2 in a minute. But first, I want to take a look at the water sewer fund overview. Strangely enough, you can see here, if I can take you to the over and under forecast in FY21, actually see a revenue decline for next year. The reason for that is the first 4 or 5 months of billings for this year done by the county really were quite high and really looked like we were really on something great. They have now settled back to a lower level, which looks like we had some one-time activities in FY20 that aren't going to repeat themselves. You can see the impact of loans. These are not new loans. These were loans that were on the book. We had just not pulled down the funding to them. We are now doing that. And you can see the impact of doing that in the capital line down below, where there's about a $2 million increase in capital expenditures. Again, for this year, look to see a positive impact on fund balance for these type of funds called working capital. And for next year, we're looking at break even at this point. Again, this is, as I said, fund balance for enterprise funds. The equivalent category is called working capital. You can see the impact of what we believe is going to be an improvement this year. Get us to a positive number, probably not as good as it should be, but certainly good enough for the moment to indicate movement in the right direction. Major objectives for your water and sewer fund. Do a leak study, continue to focus on water loss reduction. Not where we'd like to be. We'd like to get it down to 10%, which is an industry standard, higher than that right now. On the sewer side, have to cut down on inflow and infiltration. It's still higher than it should be. That's if you're not familiar with that, that's water that comes in either through leaks in your sewer mains or through holes in your or through openings in your manholes and so forth. Of the $4 million that we're paying to the county for both buying water and wastewater processing, the wastewater processing is $2.5 to $3 million. An area, if we can really get I&I under control, should afford tremendous savings for us. Have to do some other administrative things, do a hydraulic model to meet a DERM requirement. We have an issue with a lot of customers who were formerly billed by the city and now billed by the county. They have left behind delinquent accounts. That has to be resolved. There's a major effort in place for that. Again, as before, grant and loan opportunities, going to complete 2 projects. We have a fire hydrant assessment that raised about $95,000. It is meant to be used to maintain your fire hydrants, and that's exactly what you see listed here. We're going to do a valve exercising program, which has not gotten the attention it should have in recent time, and also clean some sewer mains. Water sewer fund issues. The debt that we are carrying with the county is a real challenge. We are paying at the moment $1.2 million each year, and if nothing changes, that will continue through FY23. There is also the prospect of another $500,000 a year for 5 years, having to do with meters that have installed and bought and installed by the county, and that's going to make the financing of water sewer infrastructure all the more challenging. The remaining portion at the moment is $770,000 of state revolving loan. That's all fair. It's with us long term, and something that we needed, and it's appropriate. When you add up the pieces of debt that are there, and you try and figure out how much is going to be available for future infrastructure investment, if you look at it on a pay-as-you-go basis, and I'll show you this on the next page, there's probably about $600,000 to $900,000 of free cash on an annual basis. If we get hit sooner rather than later with that additional $500,000, that reduces that number to $100,000 to $400,000. Pay-as-you-go means that you invest as you don't go for long-term debt. You just pay as you go, and it puts a squeeze on that pretty much. If the 500,000 does kick in, and we're in the 600 to 900,000 range, it could allow us to carry additional debt service if there are no other options available to us. But if the other 500,000 cuts in, it's going to be a very tight squeeze. The basis of the 600 to 900,000 number is I took the FY21 total water sewer budget, took out things that are not related to just normal providing a service. And you can see when you get down to the bottom line in the over-under column in the right-hand column, about 981,000 before contingency. If you need contingency, you're now down to 600,000. So that just says that there's some real pressure on this fund to be able to continue to invest in infrastructure. Stormwater fund overview very quickly. Things I'd like to bring your attention to. Revenue is going up. We bill right now for stormwater fees on the water utility bill, and there's some deficiencies in the way it's being done right now, and we have identified where it can be improved, and we anticipate a greater amount of revenue being derived from the charge on the utility bill next year. And there's a follow-on to that, which I'll cover in a moment. The other important thing here is, well, actually two important things. You can see the major increase in capital that's intended. And not only that, but if you go all the way down to the bottom of the proposed budget, you'll see that we're proposing to use close to $2 million of available fund balance. And I'll explain that in a little more detail. Again, based on the FY18 audit, my estimate of what's happens in FY19, it looks like we're going into FY20 with close to $1.9 million of working capital. Now, this fund should have around 300,000. It says it's 1.6 is available. Based on what I can see for FY20, it gets bumped up by 300,000. That puts us in the $2.2 million range. We'd really like to get moving on stormwater and are recommending the use of close to $2 million, getting the fund balance down to just under $300,000. Can I help you?
Hi, how's it going?
Okay.
Are you still recording?
Yeah.
We have other reports. So at the end of the presentation,
Okay.
please,
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're coming down to the end. The objectives here are the stormwater fees to be moved to the property tax bill. The reason for that is the the stormwater fees are really based on the amount of impervious area on each property. That does not line up very well with the stormwater bill. If the recommendation accepted to put it onto the property tax bill, that's going to raise the revenue potential of this fund to over $2 million a year. Going to work on other objectives are completion of the master plan and starting to do projects as listed there. Grants and loans, make sure we don't do anything in violation of environmental concerns about dumping drainage water into the canals, and also to be able to respond to flooding events as they occur. General services, mentioned very quickly, it is funded by the staff, funded by the various departments, and the primary expense you see for IT is in your operating expense, which is primarily communication expense and software expense. Again, the initiatives, will not spend time on it. These are things that want to get done. This was the IT initiative that has been discussed. And again, it really is a project to really get technology into the way we do business and redefine business processes to really move us forward and becoming more efficient effective. Risk management, same thing, funded by the various divisions that are covered by insurance coverage. And potentially the entire amount is covered, is related to various types of insurance charges. Objectives is to rebid it out, make sure we have comprehensive safety and asset protection programs, and further take a law, try to identify the causes of losses and to implement the programs that are going to correct them. Capital improvement, very quickly, is just a summary of everything you've seen before. This is where the funding comes from for the various programs that we discussed very briefly. This is governmental funds. This is a water sewer capital improvement program. And this is stormwater. And that gets us back to where we started, which is the summary of the citywide plan. And are there questions on that? I apologize, it went long, but I wanted you to get some sense of what was going on in each of the funds that come together as the citywide plan.
I think that was a perfect overview. I really appreciate the thoroughness you took in kind of walking us through not only some of the assumptions and the historical point of how we got to fiscal year 20, but then planning ahead for 2020. Just take a minute. I know Frank is on his way to another meeting. Any other board members would like to ask any questions? We'll certainly pause for a moment there. If not, I'd like to recognize the city manager and allow him to talk a little more.
If I may, very quickly, can I just finish through, because the question was on procurement. There are 2 pages at the end here.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Sorry.
It'll just, again, it really reflects what Frank said previously. The thing was really bureaucratic. It was restrictive. It was contradictory. And in other instances, it was too lax. The things that we had to deal with in the original ordinance had to do, there were interesting things, and this was picked up on the operational audits. It says, purchase supplies, equipment, services not exceeding $25,000, parenthetically, can be done by negotiation in formal bids. Not at all clear what that meant. And then it broke and went in the opposite direction and said, okay, purchase of goods, anything over $5,000, you have to go out competitively. And oh, by the way, you also had you had to forward the RFP to the commission, not the response, but just the document going out. So A, it was bureaucratic. B, you can't function if you have to bid competitively for anything over $5,000 on goods. Mirror image of that in services, where you had a requirement to have to go out competitive bid anything over $3,500. And I also mentioned in some ways it was too lax. It said, oh, by the way, if you're going after something for more than $75,000, you should have a selection committee panel to evaluate it. And that's way too high. And so we've addressed all that with the revised procurement ordinance. And that missed the page. Okay. So long story short, it fell off. What we're doing now is it's a graduated quotation system. Anything under 1,000. First off, everything is approved by the city manager. Anything over 25,000 by definition has to go to the commission for approval. It's a graduated system of quotes for anything under $1,000. It's just a phone call. From 1,000 to 2,500. What's required is 2 documented phone calls between 2,500 and 7,500, 3 documented phone calls between 7,500 and 25,000, 3 written offers from vendors. Anything over 25,000, I said before, is going to, by definition, going to go out and be competitively bid, go to the commission for approval, and we'll have an evaluation committee, not at 75,000, but at 25,000. So anyhow, that's just a summary of what Frank alluded to before. I just wanted to put in front of everybody so they could really get some understanding of the mechanics behind it. And I do appreciate your time.
Perfect. Well, I certainly don't want to jump ahead, but kudos on that presentation. It's clear the amount of work you guys have been doing. At the risk of biasing the process here, like I could easily see 4 more columns into that spreadsheet, and that would a long way to a 5-year recovery plan, right?
Several other people that it was too long. The president was.
No, absolutely. I think with just a little more work, that's the solid basis for a 5-year recovery plan. I think you're spot on. Again, some of the estimations that you'll take over the next 4 or 5 years and project out that revenue is highly uncertain, as you'd mentioned. But the reality is, as a working heuristic, I think you're spot on with that sort of a model and what that would inform the 5-year recovery process. So kudos to a lot of good work there. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I will tell you that was an outstanding presentation that was done. The commission has provided a lot of feedback in regards to the work Mr. Anthony has done since he's been here. The commission has a lot more understanding on the budget and various other activities that goes on within city municipal operations when it's done the right way. A couple updates. The City Commission had a training event with the Florida League of Cities in regards to defining what the council manager form of government is, as well as discussing the commission responsibilities and priorities and obtaining consensus as far as agenda items and board items are as they are considered, which I think was very informative. I would say not a training that was like super mandatory. I think it was training that probably was needed 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, but more of a kind of check the box, refresher, kind of understand what the manager's role is within municipal government, Opa-locka, compared to what it was in the past. So sometimes that can get kind of skewed just based on just how the city was operating in the past. So with us having newer commissioners in office, as well as myself as a new city manager in office, that was very, very imperative to have that training conducted. So everybody understands their role, and I always kind of notate my role as this, me being a CEO of a company and me having a board of directors, which is the city commission, that advises the board or the CEO what to do as far as the day-to-day operation of a business. I think more municipal governments need to take a more business model of approach when doing financial planning and operating. And I think that's very important. One thing I've tried my best to do, and I think I've been pretty successful, is instill some type of leadership amongst my department heads and create an environment for them where they're a little bit more independent and not in fear of any retribution in regards to them doing their job by the book, which I think is very important. It also provides a very diverse group of individuals that are able to provide input to the city manager's office, as well as provide input to me in regards to just day-to-day operational issues. I'd rather have a staff that's able to tell me or ask me to kind of think through a decision than somebody just be a yes person and just say yes to everything I propose and do, which it was done in the past in the city. We're back in a situation where, we have COVID-19. I don't know if anybody is aware, Opa-locka's COVID-19 rate is quite high based on the capita of the city. So we're doing a lot of initiatives as far as COVID-19 is concerned, awareness and various other programming that we're doing in regards to COVID-19. Our city hall kind of remains closed to the public based on that fear of potential spread of COVID-19. So we're taking all precautions possible to protect the staff, ensure they're able to do a efficient, effective, and proficient job on a day-to-day basis. As far as Mr. Austin, Mr. Anathan, and Ms. Lazier, these individuals, I think, are the heartbeat of the city. They provide a lot of guidance to me in their day-to-day operational items, require very little or no supervision in doing their job because they're very professional in what they do. And I think they brief me pretty decently on a daily basis and as far as how city operations are going and what is needed to kind of move the city forward. If there's no questions or concerns, we can move on with the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. I say very well done. And I really do appreciate the time and effort expended right there because, you know, that's the bread and butter of a lot of the information we need. So it's well worth our time to discuss that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I know next, moving on in your presentation, I know we were going to talk a little bit about the police report, the police department review. Was next on your agenda?
Yes, I was just waiting for, following your lead, Mr. Chair. My apologies.
Sorry about that. I know we like sometimes we hesitate on our mute button there, but like the floor is still yours. Thank you.
No worries. So in December timeframe 2019, the city went to Miami-Dade County to request a assessment of law enforcement operations within Opa-locka City's police department. There have been a lot of notable concerns brought up by individuals and our residents in regards to operations of the police department. And to be very impartial, I thought it was very important to get an impartial third party to come in and review the police department without any influence and let them look at everything as far as operations, administration, and the entire agency in a way that has a more open type of lens instead of being laser focused. Myself having a law enforcement background, I wanted to make sure that whatever assessment is done, good, bad, or indifferent, was done in an efficient, effective process that's independent. And I think that's the big word that we have, is making sure things are independent in a way that facts aren't skewed and things are done in a way that's formal, that's professional, and provides a blueprint to kind of improve city operations with regards to law enforcement services. I'm not going to get too far into the report. Everybody, I'm sure everybody has a copy of it. The report was quite scathing in regards to various areas of law enforcement operations, ranging from just standard operating procedures and general orders and guidance, managerial control, span of control related issues, and other issues in regards to officer morale, officer conduct, as well as officers not having the faith of the operations of their law enforcement agency, which of course deals with a lot of attrition related issues. While officers leave, they come to Opa-locka, they leave, they go to other nearby municipalities to do law enforcement work. And our goal here is try to keep our workforce together. So we're kind of looking at that. A part of this 5-year plan is to give the police department and other departments within the city at a working wage. The salary ranges in Opa-locka are astronomically low for low-level employees to mid-level employees. So we want to kind of address that in a systematic way within the 5-year plan so we can maintain our employees and be in an environment where it shows that the city truly cares about those individuals that work there day in and day out on a daily basis to do the best job possible. And then employees that have been in traumatic or traumatizing situations by working with the city. Just the turmoil of the commission years ago, the turmoil of managers coming and going, not having any certainty if anyone's going to have a job the next day, all stressors I've had experienced at one time or another as a worker, somebody working for an organization. So I can imagine how everyone feels, other people feel within the city of Opa-locka. So those are the focuses that we're doing. The police department did do a several step plan of action to implement changes within city operations within the law enforcement section. We're kind of working through those things, those recommendations in regards to kind of reforming and moving the department forward. The city has been very open as far as the operations of the police department, budgetarily and financially. The Chief Inspector General, Governor's designee, will tell you, as they did in the past, as you all kind of recommended in the past, is to kind of put the police department in a hold harmless situation, not to cut their budget drastically so we can have at least a decent level of law enforcement operations within the city. One notable thing in the report is there may have been deficiencies but there's nothing in the report says that the police department has not or are not able to provide effective, efficient, and proficient law enforcement services to the public. They actually commended the city on that behalf, saying that the law enforcement officers and law enforcement are working effectively as far as dealing with the public on an everyday basis, and there's no issues in regards to patrol operations and various different things like that. Most of the concerns brought up were logistical, administrative, and leadership and managerial kind of scenarios, not the day-to-day operation of responding to calls and helping citizens as you work throughout the day. So that's a great thing. So we're working towards and striving to answer that report, similar to the 99 findings, right? So now we have 99 findings that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the findings with the police audit and inspection that was just incurred, and there'll be other departments in the upcoming future will be reviewed. And as they're reviewed, put implementation plans in place and controls to ensure those departments are as successful as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously anytime you do a review or an audit financially or whatever, you're going to find things to be addressed and you're going to find things to be improvement. I mean, we're all trying to search for that ideal, right? And trying to strive for a perfect scenario. Often all of us fall short of that. But I think to your point, the real work there is to just methodically move through the organizational structure and review what you can, and then have that inform your plan. And just, from the state's perspective, just making sure that a plan is detailed in that methodical way and then executed out. Plans change just like budgets change, and there's room for growth and uncertainty, and no plan ever is a fixed asset that doesn't change. But on the other hand, the act of going through the planning process and detailing that out is I think really the overall goal there. So truly, I think you're heading in the right direction. And even though there were obvious things that could be improved in any department you look at, I personally don't see that as a scathing indictment by any stretch. So I think just the process of moving forward is what's most important now.
Understood. Mr. Chair, I would ask if any FEB members have any questions for the city manager's office. I'm available to take those questions at the time. It could be in regards to any subject I've discussed over the last hour and a half or 2 hours.
That's a perfect segue. Would love to open it up to board members that are on the call. I know Frank, I did see video drop off, but would love to hear some engagement from Vernita or Kim or JD, especially on that police report. So certainly recognize any member of the board that has anything to add at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's JD. I did get a chance to review the report, and I think it's very thorough. And I agree. I think it's not so much scathing, but it's definitely areas that need to be worked on and areas that can be, made better. And that's really what it's all about. And I just want to make myself available as well. If any discussion or any questions or comments can be directed my way, or if any ideas you want to sit down and discuss, Mr. Manager, I'm also available to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and recognizing that this is an incredibly sensitive topic, just given this moment, not only with the pandemic that's going on, but just anytime law enforcement changes are afoot in larger society, I think that conversation, JD, I know you have a wealth of experience there, and I certainly just trust your instinct, because it's not an easy thing to do, to really balance out the requirements of effective law enforcement, even under normal times, which we're certainly not in. But yes, I would certainly take advantage of your perspective on that if the city chooses to.
Mr. Chair, this is Vernita. If the city manager can share the budget slide presentation with you to distribute to us, so we can go over it and provide any insight or any questions beyond this particular meeting, that would be appreciated.
Very good point. Thank you. If you could just email that, I'm not sure if you shared that presentation already, but to Mr. Brian Hunter, he can facilitate the sending it around to all the FEB members, and we'll have it as official documentation. That would be very helpful. Understanding very clearly that that is the draft to be presented to the commission later this week.
Understood. We'll work on that. I think as efficient as Bob is, I'm sure he's typing the email up now and sending it at this moment. So
If
thank you for
if
that
you'd like to
suggestion.
share it after the commission meeting, that's fine.
No, understood. It's a public record at this point. We mentioned it and kind of discussed it in detail. So I don't have a problem with going out today prior to the commission.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all.
Yeah, that's very good. That does enable a little feedback after the meeting. So that's very helpful.
Hey, this is Kim. Regarding the police report with a little historical perspective, I dealt with Opa-locka when they were in financial emergency back in 2005 or 6, and there was another police report done, another review done by the Miami-Dade Police Department on the Opa-locka Police Department. And that one definitely was scathing, and it did have some operational issues and dealt with the patrol unit and some of the other key areas that weren't functioning very well. So it was good to see that that was not the case this time, because these issues are ones that seem to be ones that can be fixed without having done any harm to the citizens of Opa-locka. So, so good job and much success to you as you work out those, implementing those recommendations.
Thank you so much.
And I see Angela's on the line too.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Angela. So I know there has been a fair amount of interest over the years, even going back to the prior work that the emergency board did back, in 2005. Again, this is an area of keen interest, and it strikes me that as we are sitting here discussing largely the financial components, it's the reality that we see in our everyday lives that nothing happens without touching the financial components. So you can have a lot of really great policy initiatives or ideas, and then it's often the hardest job, Mr. City Manager, to tell the elected bodies and really deliberately slow yourself down and then execute a few of those ideas extremely well and go on to that larger path towards excellence instead of trying to do everything all at once. So it's so tempting for everybody to want to take every last available resource and solve every problem. But it's generally speaking, I feel better to focus that effort and then really distill down your efforts to actually accomplish something 100%. So that's not easy to say, but it's certainly not simple work. So that in my mind really is the genesis of any 5-year plan, specifically the 5-year plan that we'll talk about next. But any 5-year plan that you have in your personal life or any organization you're involved with, it kind of has to sort of accept a few of those limitations and then kind of focus your efforts accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One note I would like to make, since being in Opa-locka and kind of communicating with the Chief Inspector General and Governor's designee on the interactions between the city and the FEB, one request that I had quite personally is for my office to start sending things down for you guys to review on a more constant basis, so you can kind of understand and know what's the direction the city is going in regards to our financial structure, and also importantly, obtain input. We're working on a budget, we're working on a 5-year plan. There's any input that anyone wants to provide to the city, we're kind of more than open our doors for any one of the members of the board to provide any input or guidance to the city. I still see the city being in financial emergency at least another 2 or 3 years. So I think it's very important that we're all on the same page and moving the city forward, and we're hitting these timelines. And that was the biggest issue, I think, coming aboard, is city missing these timelines. And then now you're dealing with the legislature, you're dealing with JLAC, you're dealing with funds being withheld and a whole bunch of other statutory penalties that we deal with in the state of Florida. So I want to make sure and ensure you all have the confidence in my administration to know that we are making solid progress in regards to our financial position. And we want your input. And I know it's kind of opposite of what was provided initially when the city went into this last bit of financial emergency. I kind of want to open those doors wider so everybody's on the same page. I have a weekly call with the governor's designee and Mr. Hunter. So we always are communicating on various different things, various different subjects. And then my staff interacts with them even more on a day-to-day basis in regards to bills and cash flow and budgetary stuff and budget amendments and various different things like that. So there's an ebb and flow, and we're flowing very well at this point. I think I'm excited. I'm energized to be here. It's been 8 months. It feels like it's been 2 years, but I've been here 8 months, and I really can't believe that. And I'm energized about moving the city forward in a direction that's positive, that's conducive, and that's important to me, right? And one topic that's very much important to me is providing the city commission with accurate, clear, decisive, and truthful guidance, which I think was lacking for a very long time. And it's the manager's office, the city manager's office responsibility to ensure that the commission is briefed in a manner that they understand what's going on and they understand what my recommendations are. I've sat on the dais and I've had to make recommendations that were not popular to some, and that's my job at the end of the day, is to take that flack, take the heat, and manage 5 personalities because everybody has their niche and what they want to do and try to come together in a common goal. One small matter I do want to kind of bring up, I'm going to have Mr. Austin send over to myself so I can forward to Mr. Hunter our capital improvement project list, so you can see what the projects are currently and what we're looking at the next budget year. If you all want to provide input as far as prioritization of projects based on your observation and dealing with Opa-locka on a daily basis, as far as a financial emergency board, we would love your input in regards to our projects and kind of prioritizing those projects. Because at this point, everybody wants everything done to be done right now, immediately. And the purpose of a financial emergency board is to be a second set of eyes on the financial operations of the city. So I believe you all should be able to provide or have the ability to provide input in regards to any major projects going on in the city moving forward.
Well, I really appreciate you kind of recognizing that. We would love to look at anything that you would like to share and kind of we would provide our feedback. You know, I think I speak for the entire group when we kind of make these next statements. We've said this for a long time. You know, we certainly do not envision our role as micromanaging those decisions, because that clearly is documented to be your role, the commissioner's role. That's very well accepted and appropriate. You know, our role in a lot of ways is making sure that there's those adequate funds and reserves and the ability to actually accomplish any project. So, even from a global level, if you say that this thing here, like say Cairo Lane, the improvements there are the most important priority, then you certainly want to make sure that you have adequate resources to actually finish it. So, certainly that is the level of integration that we see between the 5-year plan, the budget, and then that set of priorities. And I can be 100% transparent with you. The fact that we're sitting here having this discussion and talking about what exactly some of these terms mean is a big step forward, because now we're having to really ask ourselves, okay, really good proposed budget, the process, like you said, all the milestones in statute and then good city management are being hit. So now we're having this more important discussion of what should be the actual priority. And that's an amazing, we're starting to grow out of the day-to-day putting out fires, which is way more interesting part of your job. I'm sure envisioning what a future successful city, and a vibrant culture and sort of like that, what that looks like is way more exciting than figuring out how to pay yesterday's bill. So, the fact that we're even having this conversation now shows how much progress we've made. And, in my mind, at least, I'll certainly ask the other members of the board, that priority setting aligned with a budget and then the forecasting of how you're going to actually accomplish those priorities. Like, that really is, I think, what the larger vision of success is from this point. But I know Vernita, Kim, JD, you got Angela, anybody chime in, because I certainly think that on our agenda is that basically reconfirming our priorities and just where we see this whole journey going next.
All right. Well, Mr. Chair, I think that kind of ends my portion of the meeting. If there are any questions, I'm of course willing to take those questions now or even during your future discussions today and moving forward. But I'm prepared to answer any questions you guys may have. If not, we can move on at your leisure. So.
Okay. Well, I think we started to bridge that gap right now on our agenda. I actually would like to see if any of the board members want to pick up what we were just talking about, like really impressed with the high level budget numbers we went through and kind of what's going to be presented. Clearly thinking through what some reasonable forecasts might be, and then thinking through what kind of constraints you may have to put on the great idea generation given those limitations on the forecasts, and then that comes back to that prioritization strategy. So Kim, Vernita, is any thoughts there on what I know they're going to share some information with us, but getting back to what a 5-year plan might look like, I think would be a good use of our time right now, especially as you start to piece some of that together for the next couple of months worth of a submission.
I don't know where where the audits, the outstanding audits play in this, but I don't want those to lag behind. Really think it's important to get those caught up as well.
Right.
Understood. And we are, like I said, at this point, we're 14 days delinquent on the current audit as due, which is, like I said, a huge stride that the city has made over multiple years. We have pushed out the last audit. I had staff working 5-7 days a week in regards to kind of dealing with those things. We're in a reset mode at this point to, number one, get the financials caught up in our financial management system, making sure proper bank reconciliations were done, and kind of moving forward. What the city was doing, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, is when we had an audit, we literally were doing the financial transactions right before the auditor came in. And while the auditor was there, it may start on October or September, October, but now we're working on January. So at the same time of them being there, we're entering financials. So we're trying to get away from that, where the auditor is stressed out and everybody's stressed and the staff is stressed because now they have to move in the pace of the auditor. If they move quickly and don't have a certain part reconciled, entered, proper journal justice made, we run into a lot of issues. So I promised Ms. Lazier, I promised the commission that this next audit won't be that way. Like I said, we're 14 days delinquent at this point. There's cities that are a year delinquent. I don't see us being in the foreshadow of anything at this point, but we are planning to have that audit completed by the end of the year to kind of move forward from there, and hopefully try our best to get us current as best as possible with the right finance staff in place, with the right guidance, and hopefully by that time, having time of the next quarterly meeting, having a permanent finance director in place, all kind of melds that together to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's professional and how a city is supposed to operate. What I'm accustomed to is the hot potato method of leadership in Opa-locka, just coming here. It's like I said, day to day is ebb and flow. Day to day is always an issue coming up of something, and we have to stop what we're doing and kind of play fire drill and put out flyers and various different things like that. But Ms. Nelson, I will tell you, we are focused on the audit. That is our utmost priority, is to get those audits completed on a timely basis and not be placed in the situation that we were early in the year with JLAC and even potential bills hitting the floor at our state capitol in regards to dissolution, with Opa-locka being used as the poster child for that. I rather set the example of what a city needs to do to come out of financial emergency, not being I don't want to be an example of what it takes to be dissolved and to go away. And so that's why we're focusing on making city services better, in communication with the commission and the community and myself and the community better, and actually working with staff to come up with solid milestones to move things forward.
I have another question. Being that you are finding difficulty in finding a permanent finance director, how long is Ms. Lazier's contract good for? Is there anything you need support to move that along, or are we good? I'm not too sure what the terms are there.
So our relationship with Tri-Merge is a positive one. I have spoken to Ms. Lazier on several instances over the last month and a half. As long as the city is showing strides to bring in a finance director, she will assist the city kind of moving forward and do a transition. And so now, when I initially came here, I was in a thought process of outsourcing the finance department, like some smaller cities do, have it outsourced to an independent third party to come in and do all financial operations. But at this point, I think our finance department is recoverable. I just think we need a couple more senior accountants in place, along with a finance director, and the city will be moving in a promising area. I mean, the pay structure of the finance director is on target. I know the city commission has raised the salary a couple of times to try to attract that right candidate to come in to deal with that risk and that liability of such an important position like that. And we've had some great interviews. We had people that are sure to come to my office and get a job offer, but they get a job offer somewhere else. Or they make a determination they don't want to come here because we don't see any positivity in regards to the city's financial position, which I thought was very important to bring on a PR and marketing person to ensure that we put positive narrative out there in regards to the city's operations, so people aren't fearful to come in and hold a professional role with the city of Opa-locka. I understand the anxiety that comes with that. Me uprooting from Chicago to Opa-locka in the midst of a lot of things going on, a lot of controversial stuff going on. So I do understand how it feels, but I do also know that that right person is out there. We just have to keep hitting the pavement harder and harder to see who we can come up with. But I know Ms. Lazier has the helm at this time. She's very much supportive of the city and its goals. The executive inspector general and the governor's designee is very happy with her performance. I am as well. And so we're going to be moving forward, and our goal is to bring in a finance director by the end of the year. And I think we will meet that goal.
So her contract will sustain through this, I don't know what the terms are. So her contract, as it reads now, has an end date of what?
I want to say, Ms. Lazier, if you could speak on that. I don't want to say.
Will it take us through the rest of the calendar year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a great just operational question. I think that's really important. It kind of comes back. I mean, as a personal opinion, I see this on a daily basis in my own operations in my organization. That's the finance and the operations side of things is really a linchpin to enabling this other success. Like to your point, it's really difficult to do what should be a retrospective activity like an audit when you're still doing those journal entries and still trying to, in fact, finalize the history that you should then be auditing. I mean, like the progress you're making there, I think is well placed as far as a priority goes. And then, just continuing to build that proper culture with regards to financial operations. And, believe me, this is simple in some ways, but it's dang sure not easy. Like this literally is hard to do, and it's a special kind of work every day that you basically are enabling and sometimes putting the brakes on a lot of good ideas, like if it's just not possible. So I think some of the priorities that you're putting on, not only, as Ms. Nelson was saying, the completion of the audit, which in my mind is really more of like hitting those milestones. It's just sort of like those standard checkpoints, like the VAB hearings, like the millage rates, like all the budget process. It's sort of like just the standard play, which is in a lot of ways a minimum price of entry. But as you look at global priorities, as we've discussed today in the budget, there obviously are various priorities. You're still worried about functioning a city, But as far as priorities go, and especially linking back to the 5-year plan, I think this area is one that rightfully is getting the attention it needs and deserves and should continue. The rebuilding in a longer sense may very well start with the appropriate staff right in that finance section. Because, in a lot of ways, that's you have to have enough people to not only do, segregation of duties, but then also have that real-time information about where you stand throughout the fiscal year, budget to action type work, giving you the right information to then brief out the commission on what's in fact possible. It's really hard to overestimate the importance of that staff function there to enable you to run the city well. Again, that's certainly say that. I don't say that in a vacuum. Like, parks and recreation are important. Civil, police protection is important. There are various other priorities. The tough work here is that you have to simultaneously do a lot of those things. But I have a feeling from what I've heard today that the emphasis put on the operations and the finance section is perhaps warranted. And I think you are making a good budget recommendation to shore up that operation and add a few positions there, even while I know 11 others were requested. And arguably they were great functions too, the ones were requested. You just can't do everything all at once. And that's what I would recommend for the 5-year plan, is just to tie it right back to, fairly conservative budget estimations, and then, some ability to hit the required milestones, and then interject a long-term strategic plan. I'm sure that there's lots of ideas floating around, but, of course, you just can't introduce every strategic vision you have in year 2 of that plan. The reality is you kind of have to grow out as you continue to improve. So I think that as a basic structure of the 5-year plan is kind of what we've been talking about for a while now.
Yeah, understood. And I think the city is in a place for the first time since this current financial emergency to actually put one together. We wanted to be close as possible as far as audited numbers were concerned. At one point, we were talking about getting current in our audits before doing a 5-year plan. Then we kind of stepped back and said, well, listen, if we get 18 done, we do some solid projections, submit a plan, and see how we can go from there. So I think with these last audited financials, even though it's from another FY, I think they're good enough to put a 5-year plan together based on the assumptions that Robert puts in, and kind of go from there to kind of move the city forward. One thing I get a little choked up, and I'll tell you why. I cannot be successful without the staff that I have. And I will tell you, I am not a subject matter expert in finance, and I always have to get taught every day in regards to dealing with our financial transactions within the city and various other capital improvement issues. So I rely on Jerry and both Robert to kind of keep me briefed up on it. So it's not just me as a city manager coming in and bringing success to the city. I think we have all the right people in the right place at the right time to move the city forward. And I'm very humbled and proud to say that.
The passion is evident, and honestly, that's exactly what we need.
Andrew, I have a couple of questions that came to mind while the manager was talking. One is a while back, the city had hired a company to come in and work on establishing a 5-year plan, I think. Am I right, Andrew?
There was talk. I don't really know that actually. Yeah, I'll let the manager take over there.
And I just wondered what happened to it, to that, if anything, if they did anything.
So there were multiple individuals that were brought in to work on a 5-year plan. With your approval, I'm not sure. Some things went without a lot of approval process going forward. So just based on your question, I'm assuming that never was presented to the FEB, but I know it's been at least 2, maybe 3 individuals brought in since this current financial emergency that the city actually paid money to can do a 5-year plan.
Right.
And instead of those individuals saying we don't have the audited financials together, they put together numbers that the state rejected. So I think there were either 1 or 2 plans submitted to the state. At a point, I don't even think they were ready for prime time to even come to you all. So they were kicked back, and those individuals were paid for work actually not accomplished or done. So at this point, we're doing a 5-year plan in-house with the technical support from the state and the governor's designee's office, as well as some input from you all as well. And I think we're able to achieve it without paying an exorbitant price for a consultant to come in when we have the numbers together, just based on this budget year and how Robert put the budget together. We can do a 5-year projection. We know what the priorities are. The biggest concern that I have, which I've already expressed this to the city commission about a week ago, or a week and a half, or 2 weeks ago, is establishing a strategic plan and establishing priorities of how monies and funds should be used, and setting those standards for the city manager's office so I can put out that guidance out to other departments. Because the biggest thing that we run into with the 5-year plan is if the commission doesn't vet it, if the commission feels that money should be used in other ways, then we're spinning our wheels again. So with the 5-year plan kind of being done this summer in lieu and with the budget process, we want to start opening up those conversations now in order to get the guidance from the commission. So once that 5-year plan is at a draft stage, they can pass a resolution approving it and move forward. And I'm very confident that will occur in a very timely manner.
Yeah, going forward, I think that the sort of the model in the past has been, obviously you referenced the staff work that you do with Special Counsel Hunter. He and I can continue to work together, and we can disseminate information to the board. So I think there is a logic to the process of when you start to get those ideas together. Obviously the state would like to take a look at both the governor's designee and the board level. And then obviously it's a quick review, but I think that whatever you come up with this year will be in a lot better shape, only because you have in fact managed to complete the audits and are on after today's presentation very sound estimation techniques and just a lot of thought going into what the reality is given given the influx of Amazon and the TPP taxes, given the fact that property taxes may stay flat, given just a lot of well-founded assumptions, I feel pretty confident that the projections out would look a lot better. And then recognizing that we could all have that conversation and say, look, they don't call it a plan for nothing, right? Because it's going to change.
Okay, and my other question is what's the status of the funds that were being withheld through JLAC due to the late audits?
So JLAC released us from those obligations in March timeframe, into March.
Okay.
We submitted the audit. They initially had a deadline of February. COVID-19 happened. We requested a 1-month extension. They granted the extension and we actually submitted the audit the day it was due, which I never want to be in that position again. Submit a document literally the day it's due to stop those monies from being withheld. But we did cross that finish line, so the state has not withheld any funds for this FY or next FY at this time.
And the funds that were withheld have been paid to the city?
Some have, and then some of the funds were not refundable. So basically they lost, you can't recover them.
Okay. Thank you.
That's an unfortunately hard lesson, right?
Exactly. And a hard lesson, and I think it was a very important lesson. So now everybody understands the severity of not being in compliance with audits. When I look at this thing called leadership, right? You got laissez-faire personalities dealing with a lot of different things. And when things are done and you don't think that Big Brother will do anything to you, and you say, listen, it doesn't matter, they're not going to do it. Why would they do that? And they finally do it. Then it's a great understanding of how you stay in compliance and know that, listen, they'll do it. They even might get to the point of want to dissolve the city, which that was a conversation for at least 3 or 4 months earlier in the year. So it's possible. And I think our commission and I think our staff very well understands that at this point. And we're just striving to kind of get those things done in a timely manner because we know that they will take action.
Right. And there is like, again, I think we've almost beat this to death, but like something that I tell my staff here all the time is that, it's ironic that a little bit of discipline actually equals freedom. If you have the discipline to do those simplistic journal transactions every day, if you have the discipline to stay on target, to actually hit those milestones, to do operations in alignment with statutes and rules and regulations, you actually have the freedom to do so much more. But without that discipline, a lot of that freedom will eventually just go away. So that's kind of how I like to think about it anyway. It keeps me on track. If we have that little bit of discipline, again, you got the discipline to get up and probably do the right thing, take a walk. You might have the freedom to have a donut at the end of the day too, kind of the things a lot of ways.
Yeah. And as far as the audits are concerned, I want to say I'm quite proud that the city did not obtain a disclaimer opinion this year, and it's a qualified opinion. And that's just because our physical assets have not been properly inventoried and depreciation and various different things like that. And if we would have had that stuff together, we would have had a very clean audit, which is great because that's a qualifying opinion is a huge stride for Opa-locka, right? Compared to where we were coming from when you had unaudited financials and a disclaimer opinion. So yeah, people see it as a qualified opinion. I see it as putting in effort and making things better and getting better every year as we go on. I'm looking forward to that clean opinion, hopefully this next audit cycle.
We're going to get there. And if it's any consolation, I have a 25-person small organization here, and I could barely keep track of 25 desks and pins and whatever we choose to put physical assets on. So I can only imagine for a full city, it's not easy work.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to depart, but I agree with all the comments, and I think we're in a much better position as a city, and the relationship is definitely positive. And I think this mutual respect and mutual cooperation is critical to us getting the city where we want to be. So thank you, and I hope everybody have a wonderful day.
JD, thank you so much for everything. So I guess I want to move on. I see what made me reminded. I see some of the commissioners' names and officials have joined us. So I think we're in a good spot on the agenda. I know we have a couple of things to expect as far as sharing the presentation, kind of continuing to have the budget discussion with the commission, moving ahead, kind of staying in contact with the governor's special designee, our board. Would love to provide feedback as all of these things line up with the budgets, to the priorities, to the 5-year plan. Everything I've heard today sounds like it's on a very good track, and I think the dialogue is open. And we're probably at the point to have a really good discussion on priorities, and obviously respecting everybody's roles and you guys identifying the priorities. But given the budget presentations we saw today and the fact that we might be able to accomplish those priorities with the limited resources that everybody has, I think is going to be very well received. So with that, I just want to take a minute, and normally if we were in the room together down there, I'd have JD try to run this section, because he and Mr. Rawson are generally in the center together. But I want to take a moment to recognize any of the Opa-locka city commissioners that may be on the phone call with us.
I know Mayor Pygott is on the call.
Just saw that. So I was hopefully,
asking
Mayor, I hate to put you on the spot, but if you have anything to add or any advice, I'd love to hear it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you, all those that are involved in this financial oversight. Thank you, Chairman Collins. I appreciate your support over this city for so many years. We've been doing this almost going on 4 years now. It's been a long road, and sitting back, I was able to come in on the tail end of the budget presentation, and to see the dialogue presentation by the budget administrator and also city manager. It is definitely big change in the level of information and consistency, and also positive news that we're doing as moving this city forward, the city of Opa-locka. So I want to give much respect to the staff, the city manager office, and all those that prepared for this meeting to ensure that we're on the same page. Also, for those financial oversight board members, just thank you for continuing to ask those questions. Please continue to hold us accountable. Make sure that we are transparent as a government. We want to make sure that as we go through this process, we utilize the full strength and accountability that the Financial Oversight Board provides to getting this city back on its feet. And I just want to say thank you, Chairman Collins and Inspector General, for being able to basically help shepherd us in this direction. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversations we've had over this the last year or so, and I honestly I can't wait till you know, part of this is over and we can all be together again in person. I know this is I have to compliment the IT staff on the nice backgrounds. Like I think you guys look really good with the screenshots behind you. I think that looks amazingly professional. And,
stepping it up.
Honestly, yeah, I'm sure you have to run all of your commission meetings a little different now. So it's hopefully it's a new reality for a short term, and we'll get back to being in person. Only because the community building, the reason that the why we do this, it's so much harder to do it like this because you're not in person, you're not establishing those community bonds. You know, a lot of the things that we have to talk about here are very low level and minute details, but the only reason that you do it the right way, that way, is so you can then accomplish that community building. Like that's the whole point. And I know that's where we're going to get back to, you know, some of those aspirational projects like completing the historic building, you know, getting a lot of infrastructure projects done. Mayor Pygott, you may have heard, we started to talk a little bit about priorities and you know, again, like you guys are in amazingly good position. Now all it takes, I think, is a little bit of discipline to just do it at the right pace and not start too much and then not complete. So again, it just takes a lot of discipline to prioritize and have that vision and then methodically chip away at it and accomplish it. And I know that was actually one of the very first phone calls that you and I had some time back now, a year or so ago, was as how patient you really have to be. And it's amazing, you know, that it just, as much as we can all see the vision so clearly, you know, it's the discipline and the character it takes to show up every day and continue to do the right thing and make those what seemed like such small little gains and then, you know, do it year after year after year. And then honestly, it transcends a legacy for an elected official because it may or may not be done in a term limit or 2 or 3. You know, this is a legacy building project and not necessarily a quick win. So, you know, that sort of long range vision is I think where the city, both on the management, the staff side, as well as the elected official side, I think everybody's coming back to that realization, which makes me feel very positive.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And I say, the only thing I would ask as a board is to continue to be a resource to our city manager, especially our finance department. As I said, we do have some challenges within that, making sure we have full staffing there. And able to complete the huge amount of work to rebuild that department and make sure we take care of the things we need to do. So being that resource and investigating, and then also any resource you have, as the manager has stated, one of the things he's doing is the assessment of all our departments. We started with the police department. We're looking to do that all throughout all our departments. So any resources, assistance that we can get to ensure that we can build up this government to where it should be. That's where it's what we want to do. So thank you very much for your support.
So I'm actually just scrolling back over to the participant list. I brought that back up and I think there may be another elected official on the call if we have a moment to recognize.
Yeah, I believe it's Commissioner Bass.
So I know that it may not be immediately available, but certainly want to take a moment and see if anybody else on the city commissioner side has any more comments or good thinking.
Good afternoon. This is Commissioner Bass.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I just want to say a pleasant good afternoon to each and every one of you, to our chair, Mr. Collins, and this board and the board members. Thank you so much for the time and effort that you're putting into us as a city to help us to move forward. We do appreciate you. Thank you to Opa-locka staff, to Ms. Jerry, Mr. Austin, our finance department, to each and every one of you. We can do this. Together we stand, but divided we would fall. So thank you all so much. Looking forward to continuing working with you all. Thank you.
Perfect. Right. Thank you so much. So I believe we can transition the meeting into the public comment section, and I'm probably going to pause. Ms. Nelson, you have a.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I am going to have to depart in the next probably 5 minutes to make it to another meeting. I know public comments is very important to us, so I will be sure to review that section of the meeting on the YouTube channel for Opa-locka as this is being recorded. So if I depart before the meeting ends, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to pause and ask a process question right here because I'm not sure how widely this link was spread or how we want to handle the public comments. I thought they might have actually been emailed or some other way to be collected, but I'm going to probably ask that process question from the meeting organizer.
Our city clerk's information was provided for public comment, so I asked Ms. Flores to ask her, were there any public comments that came in for the meeting? So
Okay.
The city kind of facilitated that part.
Okay, well, if we can move into that section, if there are any public comments to be recorded, we could certainly handle that now.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I did not receive any public comments via email. However, I would need to confirm with Mr. Rodriguez whether he received any pre-recorded messages.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. I just verified we did not receive any voicemails with any public comment as of right now.
Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys for facilitating that section of our agenda. Such an important function, and I know we will be available to meet again in person at some point, but this is a really good method that we have now for ensuring that there is that public comment. So with that section of the agenda taken care of, I know everybody's got other commitments and we've gone a little long, but certainly appreciative of everybody's time and the ability to have such a thorough budget walkthrough. And I know that's going to serve you well on Thursday night because that was an impressive presentation and it'll be replicated again in just a few short days. So with that, unless anybody has any board members have any final comments or additional process things that I may have forgotten, we can adjourn. So Bernita, Kim, anything that we may have missed there?
Nope, I move to adjourn.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And we will be in touch. Mr. City Manager, we will be in touch. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time as well.
Take care, guys.
All right, bye-bye.